In the hush of dawn, when the mist still clings to the earth like a shroud and the world seems suspended between night and day, the life of a medieval peasant stirs awake. Imagine yourself there, not as a lord on horseback or a knight in shining armor, but as one of the countless men and women who made up the backbone of the Middle Ages. History rarely whispers their names, yet their footsteps, their sweat, and their struggles built the very foundations of the castles and kingdoms we so often admire. You are not reading of kings and queens today, but stepping into the wooden shoes of a peasant who lives where the soil is both master and companion, where survival is a daily question, and where every sunrise is both a promise and a burden. Close your eyes and let yourself sink into this life, for it is not gilded or grand, but it is the life most truly lived in those times, the life of the medieval peasant. The morning begins long before the sun's golden rim peaks over the horizon. A rooster's call echoes sharply through the still air, announcing the start of yet another day of toil. In a small, smoky hut with walls of wattle and daub, and a thatched roof that leaks when the rains are heavy, you awaken on a straw-stuffed mattress. The blanket is thin, perhaps just an old woolen cloth, patched more times than you can count. Beside you, your family also stirs the smell of smoke still lingering from last night's fire, faintly mixed with the earthy scent of damp straw and the faint mustiness of clothing that rarely sees soap. The single room serves for all, a hearth at the center, a small table roughly carved by hand, a few stools, and one wooden chest holding the little that is precious, perhaps a pewter cup, a small knife, or a rosary bead. The day begins, not with choice, but with necessity. Hunger gnaws first, for food is never abundant, and the morning meal is simple. A crust of coarse black bread may be dipped in weak ale brewed at home, or a thin pottage made of barley and whatever root vegetables survived the winter. Meat is rare, reserved for feast days, or as a fleeting taste when hunting luck strikes, though most game belongs by law to the Lord. To snare a rabbit or a deer without permission is to risk the stocks, or worse. So the peasant begins the day with little, for the body must move before it can hope to feast. Stepping outside, the air bites cool against your skin, though the season matters. In spring, the earth is soft and wet, demanding seed. In summer, the fields call constantly with weeding and tending. In autumn, the harvest becomes the single great effort upon which survival depends. In winter, life shrinks to endurance patching roofs, mending tools, and hoping the stores of grain and salted vegetables last until the thaw. Every day, every hour, is shaped by this unyielding rhythm. The land is not your own. You are a serf bound to the manor, owing labor and dues to the Lord in exchange for the right to work a strip of land that feeds your family. Each week, several days must be given over to the domain the Lord's own fields where you plow, sow, and reap not for yourself, but for Him. The manor system is the skeleton of medieval society, and as a peasant, you are its flesh. Though free peasants exist, able to move or bargain with coin, most are tied by birth to the soil, as if the land itself claimed them at the cradle, and will keep them until the grave. The plow waits heavy and crude, often drawn not by sleek horses, but by oxen, slow and strong. The soil of northern Europe is thick and heavy, demanding the new heavy plow of the age, a marvel compared to the lighter scratch plows of southern lands. You join your neighbors in the common field, for the land is divided into great open strips, shared and scattered among the village, so no one family holds the best of it all. Here lies both the strength and the burden of peasant life. The community is ever present. You cannot farm alone, for the work is too vast and the law too strict. You rise together, labor together, and suffer together when harvests fail. The village itself is small, perhaps 20 or 30 families at most, clustered around a narrow lane, with huts pressed close for warmth and safety. At the center stands the church, small but proud, its simple wooden cross rising above the thatched roofs as a beacon. Faith is not a choice but a constant presence, as sure as hunger or weather. Bells toll from its tower, marking the hours, calling to mass, and reminding the peasant that beyond lord and labor lies God, whose judgment is final, whose mercy is begged with whispered prayers. The priest is often the only man in the village who can read, and he holds power not through the sword, but through the word. He teaches of heaven and hell, of sin and penance, and his voice can soothe or terrify. To the peasant, his words give meaning to suffering. For why must life be endless toil? Why must a child die of fever? Why must hunger gnaw when the Lord's hall overflows? Because this world, says the priest, is but a passage. Endure with faith, and paradise awaits beyond. To question is dangerous, to accept is survival, and so the day continues with labor. The fields stretch wide, and each furrow turned feels endless, but the rhythm of the work is familiar. The creak of the plow, the grunt of oxen, the call of neighbors all weave into a kind of rough music. Children too young to handle the plow chase crows from the seed, their shouts piercing the air, while women tend small gardens near the huts, weaving cloth on simple looms, or helping in the fields when hands are short. Everyone works, for idleness is a luxury only lords can afford. Midday comes, and with it, a pause. Under the shade of a tree, you share a meal no finer than the morning's. Bread, perhaps some cheese, if the cow has given milk, and more ale. Water is often unsafe, drawn from wells or streams that carry disease, so ale, weak but safer, becomes the drink of choice, even for children. Conversation is simple, talk of weather, of animals, of the Lord's steward who measures out dues with an unyielding eye. Laughter is rare, but not absent. Even in hardship, joy finds its cracks, whether in a joke, a song, or the sight of children at play. As the sun lowers, the tasks shift. Tools are mended with rough hands, fences patched, roofs checked. Perhaps you walk to the mill with a sack of grain, for bread cannot be made until wheat or barley is ground, and the mill belongs to the Lord. A portion of the grain must be given as payment, for nothing is free, not even the air, it seems. At times, resentment stirs. Why must the sweat of your brow feed another's table? Yet the order of the world is clear and ancient. To challenge it is folly. Stories of revolts whisper through the land, peasants rising with sickles and clubs, only to be crushed by mailed knights. Such tales spread like smoke, warning and inspiring at once. Evening comes, and with it the briefest taste of rest. The hearth glows, filling the hut with warmth and smoke. Supper is pottage again, thicker now, with beans or peas, flavored, if lucky, with a scrap of bacon fat. Families gather close, children nodding into slumber, while elders recall tales of saints, of local legends, or of times past. Light fades quickly, for candles are dear, and firewood is scarce, or darkness brings fear as well as rest. For the night is the realm of thieves, wolves, and spirits whispered about in hushed tones. To step outside after dark is to step into uncertainty. Better to close the door, bar it with a plank, and trust that dawn will return. The life of a peasant is not one of great events, but of endless repetition. Yet within this rhythm lies meaning, for every small act ties you to the earth and to each other. The sowing of seed is not just labor, but hope. The harvest is not just toil, but survival. A birth is joy, though shadowed by the fear of loss. A marriage is not just love, but alliance, a weaving together of families who must depend on one another. Death comes often, but the bell tolls, prayers are said, and life continues. Festivals break the monotony. On holy days, work ceases, and the village gathers with music, dancing, and feasting. However modest, May Day, with its flowers and games, brings laughter. Harvest festivals celebrate survival. Christmas and Easter shine brightest, filling the church with candlelight and the village with songs. For a moment, peasants become more than laborers. They are a community bound by joy as much as necessity. Yet even in joy, shadow lingers. Disease is constant. A simple cut can fester. A fever can carry a child away in days. Famine lurks when rains fail or blight strikes. War, though distant in castles and courts, descends like a storm when armies march, trampling fields, seizing food, and leaving ash. To be a peasant is to live always on the edge, never far from disaster, yet always clinging to life. And as you lie down once more upon the straw, the fire burning low, you whisper a prayer, half gratitude, half plea. The day has ended, as so many have, in toil and weariness. Tomorrow will come the same, and the next, and the next, until your hands are too weak to plow and your back too bent to rise. But for now, you sleep, wrapped not in silk but in necessity, dreaming perhaps of better harvests, of warm summers, or of the paradise promised by the priest. Such is the life of the medieval peasant, endless, harsh, humble, and yet profoundly human. When the morning returns, the cycle repeats itself with little change, yet each day carries subtle differences. The rain may soften the soil or turn paths into sucking mud. A neighbor may fall ill, and suddenly the community must rally to tend his strip of land. For if his field fails, the village feels the loss together. Life is bound not only to the seasons, but to one another, an interwoven fabric of duty and necessity. The sounds of village life form their own symphony. Chickens cluck and scratch near the huts. Pigs grunt in pens. Oxen bellow as they are yoked, and children's voices rise in chatter. The clang of the blacksmith's hammer carries from the edge of the village, where the smith's small forge burns day and night. He is no lord, yet he holds respect, for without his skill the plow would break, the horses would go unshod, and the knives would dull. His hut smells of iron and smoke, and sparks dance from his hammer with every strike. Though he too is a peasant, his craft makes him essential, and the Lord himself may call upon him for work. Further along, the miller turns the wheel, his watermill groaning as the stream powers it. To the peasant, the miller is both ally and irritation, for his work is needed, but his tolls are heavy. Rumors cling to millers, as shadows cling to night. Some say they keep more than their share, that their sacks grow lighter, while the miller grows fatter. Yet no bread can be made without the grinding of grain. And so you walk to his door with a sack on your back, knowing part of it will remain in his storehouse. Taxes and dues weigh heavily on every family. Not only must labor be given to the Lord's fields, but a portion of your own harvest belongs to Him, as well as payments in kind, eggs, chickens, honey, or cloth. The church, too, demands its share. The tithe, 1/10 of all you produce, offered not in coin but in goods. To refuse is unthinkable, for the priest warns of hellfire as swiftly as the steward threatens punishment. Thus, after months of back-breaking work, what remains is meager, and hunger always lurks near. Yet, amidst hardship, there are bonds of warmth. Families gather not just for survival, but for love. Parents teach children the crafts of the household, how to mend clothes, how to tend goats, how to weave baskets from reeds gathered by the river. Songs are sung, rough and simple, passed down through generations, telling of saints and spirits, of love and labor. Around the fire, stories breathe life into long evening stales of wolves with glowing eyes, of maidens lost in forests, of battles fought long ago. To the peasant, the world is not divided between real and unreal, but is alive with mystery. Spirits linger in the woods, fair folk might play tricks at night, and every shadow has meaning. Your diet defines your strength, and though it is poor by the measure of lords, it is enough to carry you through. Pottage, made from peas, beans, onions, and cabbage, simmered over the fire, forms the staple. Bread, dense and dark, with bran, fills the belly. On rare days, a fish from the stream or a piece of salted pork finds its way into the pot, and on feast days the Lord might offer a slaughtered ox or deer, feeding the village in a moment of uncharacteristic generosity. The taste of fat, rich and savory, lingers in memory long after the meal ends, a reminder of what abundance could be. Children work as soon as they can, walk steady. A boy might scare birds from the field, gather firewood, or fetch water from the well. A girl helps her mother with cooking, spinning wool, or caring for younger siblings. Play exists, but it is woven into duty wooden toys carved from scraps, games of tag among the sheep, songs sung while weeding gardens. Childhood is short, for by the age of 12 or 14, a child is already a worker, nearly grown, and often betrothed or wed. Life pushes swiftly, for death waits close, and the years of strength are too precious to waste. Marriage among peasants is as much about survival as affection. Land is scarce, and to marry is to bind to families, to ensure the next generation has hands to work and mouths to share. The Church sanctifies the union, blessing it as sacred, yet the practical matters weigh heavier. A dowry, however small, must be offered, whether in coin, livestock, or goods. The wedding itself is a rare day of joy, with ale flowing, dances circling the green, and laughter echoing through the village. For a moment, poverty is forgotten, and the couple steps into their new life with hope. But alongside hope lies fear. Childbirth is perilous, a line walked between life and death with every birth. Women carry the burden heavily, often giving birth many times, for not all children survive infancy. To cradle a child is to love deeply, but also to brace for loss. A cough, a fever, or the pox can steal life swiftly, and graves in the churchyard hold as many little bodies as grown ones. Still, children are cherished, for they are the future, the labor, the continuation of all that the peasant endures. The seasons remain the master. Spring demands sowing, the careful planting of wheat and barley, the tending of gardens, and the mending of tools. Summer is weeding, endless hours bent low in the sun. Autumn is harvest, frantic and urgent, the reaping of grain before rain ruins it, the storing of crops in lofts and pits. Winter is endurance, the sharing of stories by the fire, the patching of roofs battered by storms, the waiting for light to return. Each season bears its weight, and failure in one can doom the year. Amid these labors, the Lord's shadow looms large. He rides through the village on horseback, a figure of awe and distance, armored knights at his side. His hall rises above the fields, wooden at first, stone in richer times, with banners snapping in the wind. To the peasant, he is both protector and oppressor. His men guard the land from raiders, yet his demands strip the peasant of what little remains. Justice flows from him, harsh and swift, whether in the manor court or in punishments carried out in the square. The stocks, the lash, the branding iron, these remind the peasant of his place. To kneel and bow is instinct, for rebellion is crushed and obedience is survival. Yet even within these bounds, peasants find ways to carve dignity. A well-tended field, a skill at carpentry, a song sung at festival all bring respect among neighbors. Honor is not in wealth but in labor, in being known as reliable, hard-working, and faithful. Gossip is sharp, and reputation matters. To be lazy is to be scorned. To be generous, to share when one has little, earns admiration that no Lord's gift can match. The year turns, and with it, the festivals mark time. Candlemas in February, Easter in spring, midsummer's bonfires blazing high, All Hallows in autumn, and Christmas when the year closes. Each holy day interrupts the grind of labor with moments of light. Candles glow in the church, processions wind through the village, and songs echo across fields. Ale flows more freely, bread is baked richer, and children laugh louder. These are the days when peasants glimpse joy, when life feels larger than toil, when the soul breathes. But always, hardship returns. A storm can flatten crops, hail can strip fields bare, and frost can kill seedlings overnight. Hunger stalks in lean years, when granaries run low before spring brings relief. Disease spreads without warning, a cough turning to plague, sweeping through villages and leaving silence in its wake. The memory of pestilence is never far. Even before the Black Death, every fever is feared, every swelling a warning. To live as a peasant is to live with death as a constant neighbor, one who knocks often and without mercy. And still the peasant endures. Each day is marked by labor, each year by survival. Yet within this rhythm lies resilience. There is laughter at weddings, joy at a birth, comfort in the warmth of family. There is pride in a well-plowed field, in a roof that stands against the storm, in children who grow strong. There is faith that suffering has meaning, that heaven waits beyond, that God sees the lowly as surely as the mighty. So the days flow, one into the next, weaving a life humble yet profound. The peasant rises with the sun, labors until dusk, prays at the church, and sleeps by the fire. And though the world rarely speaks his name, without him the Lord's castle would crumble. The knight's horse would go unfed, the king's court would starve. In silence and sweat, in fields and huts, the medieval peasant carries the weight of an age. The fire burns low as night deepens, the last embers glowing red in the hearth, while shadows stretch across the walls of the hut. Outside, the sounds of the village soften into stillness. A dog barking once before settling, the shuffle of hooves as oxen shift in their pens, the distant hoot of an owl from the forest edge. Within, family gathers close, for warmth and for comfort. The straw mattress creaks as children curl against one another, breathing slow and heavy. Parents murmur a final prayer, tracing a cross in the air, asking for protection through the darkness. For the night is not empty, but filled with the unknown. Spirits, it is said, wander when the moon is hidden. Witches may dance in secret clearings. Wolves, lean and hungry, prowl along the edges of pasture, their howls raising hairs on the neck. But within the small hut, with its low ceiling and smoke-darkened beams, the family feels safe enough, bound by love and necessity. Dreams come easily after a day of labor. In them, peasants sometimes walk fields heavy with golden wheat, harvests so bountiful that hunger is forgotten. Or they imagine meat roasting on spits, mugs brimming with ale, laughter rolling through the night. Others dream of heaven, of angels bright as fire, of rest eternal after toil unending. Yet not all dreams are sweet. Some bring back the faces of children lost, or fields ruined, or the sound of hoofbeats when soldiers ride through. Even in sleep, the peasant's mind knows both hope and fear. At dawn, it begins again. The rooster cries, the oxen low, the children stir. Another day awaits, indistinguishable yet essential. The tools are lifted, the bread is broken, the fields call, and so the wheel of life turns, steady and relentless. A lifetime may pass in this rhythm, marked only by small moments: a child's first step, a wedding dance, the sound of church bells calling for a burial. These are the milestones of a peasant's existence, humble yet immense in their meaning. Years blur in memory, for life changes little from one to the next, and yet beneath the sameness lies strength. Generations rise and fall, each leaving their sweat in the soil, their bones in the churchyard. Castles may crumble, kings may be forgotten, but the land remembers the peasants, the ones who worked it, the ones who drew life from it, even as it demanded all they had to give. For the medieval peasant, greatness was not measured in gold or glory, but in endurance. To till the field, to raise children, to survive the winter, to share bread with neighbors. These were triumphs as real as any knight's victory in battle. Their legacy was not in chronicles or tapestries, but in the silent persistence of life itself. Theirs was the anonymous heroism of survival. And so, as the first part of this story closes, you find yourself not among kings or knights, but among those whose names are lost, yet whose lives carried the age upon their shoulders. Their huts may have crumbled, their graves may be unmarked, but their story endures. The life of a medieval peasant was harsh, weary, and often cruel, yet within it beat the same heart that beats in us still, the longing for warmth, for love, for hope beyond hardship. The fire dies, the village sleeps, and tomorrow waits. The peasant's life, though simple, continues with the rising of the sun. The frost still clings to the edges of the thatched roofs as dawn breaks, and the sound of footsteps on the frozen earth stirs the village awake. Breath hangs in clouds before the mouths of those stepping outside, their cloaks wrapped tight, their hands raw with cold. Winter has tightened its grip, and though the harvest is stored, anxiety gnaws at every household. Each meal makes the storehouses lighter, each day draws spring nearer, yet the question always lingers: will the food last? In the dim light, a man hauls a sack of barley from his chest, carefully measuring what must be ground into flour. It is a delicate balance, too much eaten too quickly, and the family will starve before the thaw. too little, and weakness makes the cold unbearable. The miller waits by his wheel, the water sluggish beneath a skin of ice, his eyes sharp as he measures the toll. He takes his due without hesitation, and the peasant accepts with quiet bitterness, for complaint is useless. Hunger is endured in silence. Children's faces are pale in winter, their cheeks hollowed, their play subdued. They gather twigs and brush for the hearth, their fingers numb, their eyes searching the ground for any sign of food, a nut, a root, a scrap. Mothers stir pots over weak fires, stretching broth with water, breaking bread into smaller pieces, whispering prayers that spring comes early. Nights feel endless, and fear grows sharper in darkness. Illness often finds its way into the huts during these months, creeping like a shadow. Coughs turn to fevers, fevers to funerals. The bell in the churchyard tolls too often in the cold season. When death comes, it is met with resignation. The village gathers, wrapping the body in simple cloth, carrying it to the churchyard on a rough bier. The priest chants the Latin words few understand, but the rhythm soothes. The promise of heaven offers comfort. The earth is frozen, the grave shallow, but it is enough. Life continues, for grief cannot stop hunger, nor labor, nor the slow march of time. With the thaw, the rhythm of life quickens again. Snow melts into mud, and the earth, wet and heavy, calls for plowing. Oxen groan under the yoke, their hooves sinking deep into the soft ground as men strain behind them, turning furrow after furrow. The smell of damp earth rises, and the air hums with renewed urgency. Seeds must be sown quickly before weeds claim the fields. Children scatter to frighten birds. Women follow with baskets of seed, and men press on, knowing each moment lost now may mean hunger in winter. The village bursts with motion as spring ripens. Sheep are sheared, their wool spun into rough thread. Cows calve, chickens lay more plentifully, and the gardens near the huts begin to green. The priest blesses the fields, sprinkling holy water, chanting prayers for good harvest. Every gesture, every ritual carries weight, for the line between survival and ruin is thin. A storm at the wrong time, a blight on the crops, and the year may be lost. The village life is never solitary, for labor is shared. Men gather to repair fences along the common pasture, women to spin wool together while gossip flows, children to herd animals at the edge of the woods. A sick neighbor will find others tending his fields, for tomorrow the favor may be needed in return. The Lord's steward rides into the village in spring, his cloak clean, his boots fine, his voice sharp as he calls names from his parchment. Dues are tallied, obligations reminded. Men bow, women lower their eyes, children cling to their mothers' skirts. The steward does not smile, does not jest. His is a face of business, of calculation. Every family owes labor, every field owes grain, every back is bent in service. He notes each promise with a quill, scratches marks on the page, and rides away, leaving a weight heavier than his words. Festivals pierce through the labor like sudden bursts of color. At May Day, flowers crown the heads of young girls. A maypole rises in the village green, and songs echo late into the evening. Ale flows more freely, laughter shakes the air, and for a brief moment the world feels brighter. Couples sneak glances, hands brush, vows are whispered in shadows. Life, even in hardship, finds its sweetness. The summer heat presses down as days stretch long. The fields demand constant weeding, the animals constant tending. Sweat soaks tunics, and backs ache beneath the weight of labor. Yet there is satisfaction in the sight of grain ripening, stalks standing tall and golden beneath the sun. The peasants watch the sky with anxious eyes, for storms can flatten fields in an hour. Hail can destroy months of work. Each cloud is both promise and threat, each gust of wind a warning. At harvest, the village becomes a single body, every hand at work. Sickles flash in the sun, grain falls in heaps, bundles rise into stacks. The air is filled with dust, sweat, and the constant rhythm of cutting, binding, carrying. Voices call, songs rise, children run with bundles too big for their arms. Laughter breaks through the exhaustion. For this is the heart of peasant life, the harvest upon which all else depends. At night, fires glow, food is shared, and the joy of abundance fills the air. For a few weeks, hunger seems far away, and bellies are full. But the harvest is not theirs alone. The Lord's men arrive with carts, collecting his share. Grain is measured, livestock tallied, honey taken, eggs counted. The tithe to the church follows, 1 sheaf in 10 laid aside, the priest's hand raised in blessing. What remains is meager compared to what was taken, yet enough must be stretched through the long months ahead. Sighs and murmurs pass through the village, but no one dares to resist. To hide grain is a dangerous gamble, for discovery brings punishment, swift and cruel. Winter returns, as it always does. The cycle spins on year after year, each season carving deeper lines into faces, bending backs further, hardening hands to leather. Life is measured not in years, but in harvests, in winters endured, in children grown. To reach old age is rare, and those who do are marked with respect, their wisdom valued, their stories cherished. They sit by the fire, recalling times of famine, of raids, of strange omens in the sky. Younger faces listen, wide-eyed, absorbing the lessons of endurance. And through it all, faith binds the village. The church stands at its center, its bells marking time, its rituals marking life and death. Baptisms, marriages, funerals all pass through its doors. The priest's Latin is foreign, but the rhythms sink deep, the candles glow warm. The painted saints stare from the walls with solemn eyes. Heaven is promised, hell is warned, purgatory is feared. In faith, peasants find meaning, for without it, suffering feels empty. With it, suffering becomes a path, however harsh, toward eternal rest. Thus the peasant's life continues, unbroken, unchanging, yet enduring. Each dawn is another step in the circle, each season another turn of the wheel. It is a life of hardship, yes, but also of resilience, of bonds strong as oak roots, of hearts that, though worn and weary, still find moments of joy in the midst of toil. The rooster crowed long before the first light touched the stone towers, its call echoing across the damp courtyard. The castle walls, dark and glistening from the night's dew, stood like ancient guardians against the gray horizon. A light fog clung to the moat, drifting lazily, as though reluctant to leave, while the wooden drawbridge creaked faintly in the stillness of dawn. Within the protective embrace of the fortress, life was already stirring. In the stables, the stable boys moved quickly, rubbing sleep from their eyes as they shoveled hay and laid out feed. Horses stamped their hooves impatiently, tossing their heads with snorts that puffed little clouds into the chill morning air. The boys worked with practiced hands, tightening harnesses, filling troughs with water hauled from the well, and whispering to the animals as though they were old companions. From above, the watchman on the battlements glanced down, adjusting his cloak against the wind. His shift had dragged on through the cold night, and his breath fogged as he muttered about wishing for the warmth of a hearth fire. Still, he scanned the landscape carefully, eyes trained to spot any movement in the fields beyond. Inside the keep, servants hurried through narrow stone passages, their soft leather shoes padding against the worn flagstones. The kitchens came alive first, smoke billowing from the great hearth as the cook barked orders. Pots clanged, bread dough was kneaded with swift hands, and spits were prepared for the roasting of meat. The faint smell of wood smoke and boiling porridge began to weave its way up through the castle, reaching even the upper chambers. In the Lord's chamber, heavy curtains were drawn back by a chamberlain, letting a sliver of pale light spill across the rushes scattered on the floor. The Lord stirred beneath his thick furs, his face weathered from years of both battle and rule. His lady, already half awake, watched as servants set out basins of cold water and carefully laid her gown across a chest. The embroidered fabric gleamed in the faint light, its rich colors a stark contrast to the gray stones of the chamber. She rose slowly, her breath misting in the air, and allowed her maid to lace the gown while she murmured instructions for the day. Beyond these noble quarters, the hum of daily life grew louder. Children of servants chased one another through the side yard, only to be scolded by a laundress carrying a heavy basket of damp linens. A blacksmith hammered at the forge near the outer gate, sparks flying as he shaped iron into tools and horseshoes. The sound rang sharply through the morning, blending with the bleating of sheep penned close to the wall and the cackling of hens in the small coop. By mid-morning, the castle was fully awake. The chapel bell rang, summoning all who could attend to morning prayers. The small stone chapel, cool and dim, filled with the murmurs of voices as the priest intoned familiar Latin verses. The noble family knelt at the front, their clothing marked by fine detail and bright color, while the servants and guards knelt further back, heads bowed in quiet reverence. Candles flickered in the draught, and the scent of incense hung heavy, mingling with the smell of damp stone. When prayers ended, the castle shifted once again into its rhythm of work and duty. The steward, a stern man with parchment and quill always at hand, made his rounds, checking supplies in the storerooms. Barrels of ale were inspected, sacks of grain tallied, and disputes over missing cheese or poorly counted eggs noted with irritation. The steward's voice could be heard echoing through the halls as he demanded accuracy and order, for it was his task to ensure the household ran smoothly and that nothing slipped through the cracks of responsibility. Meanwhile, training began in the yard. Young squires and pages, clad in simple tunics, ran drills under the watchful eye of the master-at-arms. Wooden swords clashed, shields thudded, and voices cried out as blows landed. The clang of steel against steel echoed when the older squires were allowed practice with real weapons, sweat shining on their brows despite the chill air. The Lord himself occasionally appeared to watch, his sharp gaze assessing which of the youths showed promise and which lagged behind. A word of praise or a correction from him was remembered for weeks, for his approval carried the weight of honor. The ladies of the castle gathered in a chamber lined with tapestries to spin, weave, and embroider. Their needles moved with practiced precision as they spoke softly of household matters, marriages, and rumors carried by travelers. Bright threads of red, gold, and blue took shape on the fabric stretched across wooden frames, patterns of hunting scenes, saints, and vines slowly emerging. The work was endless, but it filled the hours between prayers and meals, binding the women together in quiet companionship. The kitchens, always the busiest part of the castle, swelled with noise as the day wore on. Cauldrons bubbled with pottage made from vegetables and scraps of meat. The great oven glowed hot for the baking of bread, its smell drifting through the corridors and making stomachs growl. Servants carried heavy pitchers of watered ale, the staple drink, up and down the stairs. Dogs lingered by the kitchen door, tails wagging in hopeful anticipation of scraps tossed their way. By midday, the hall was prepared for the main meal. Long wooden tables were laid with trenchers of bread, bowls of stew, and plates of roasted meat for those fortunate enough to sit near the Lord. The high table at the far end of the hall was covered with a cloth, a mark of honor, and set with finer cups and dishes. The Lord and Lady entered with measured dignity, their children trailing behind. The household stood until the priest gave a blessing, and then the feast began. The noise of talking, laughter, and clinking cups filled the cavernous hall as servants moved swiftly to refill plates and pitchers. Entertainment accompanied the meal. A minstrel plucked at his lute, singing tales of knights and saints, his voice rising above the din. Now and then a jester capered, drawing laughter with his antics. At the lower tables, soldiers and servants spoke freely, their voices mixing in a low roar. The warmth of the fires in the great hearth mingled with the smells of roasted meat and fresh bread, creating an atmosphere both hearty and boisterous. When the meal ended, the scraps were gathered and carried to the poor waiting at the gates, for a noble household was expected to show generosity as well as power. The dogs leaped eagerly at bones tossed their way, and the hall slowly emptied as duties resumed. The Lord retreated to speak with his steward about tenants, taxes, and the coming harvest, while the lady oversaw the work of the women, ensuring that the spinning and sewing continued apace. In the quiet that followed the midday rush, the castle seemed to exhale. Guards patrolled the walls at a steady pace, their armor glinting faintly in the afternoon sun. Farmers from nearby fields arrived, with carts of grain, firewood, and vegetables, paying their dues or trading with the steward. A traveling merchant, allowed within the gates after inspection, spread out his wares of bright cloth, trinkets, and spices that filled the courtyard with unfamiliar scents. Children gathered around him, wide-eyed at the colorful beads and polished knives, while their mothers haggled over the price of salt and thread. As the afternoon deepened, the rhythm of work returned. The forge rang again with the hammer's strike. The kitchens prepared for the evening meal, and the chapel bell called once more for prayers. Pages hurried through corridors, carrying messages, and the sound of distant laughter drifted from the women's chambers. Life in the castle, though bound by duty and order, carried moments of lightness, as well moments of songs, companionship, and even joy, hidden within the gray walls of stone. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the courtyard. The watchmen lit torches along the battlements, their flames flickering against the twilight. The gates creaked shut, the drawbridge lifted, and the moat rippled as the chains rattled into place. The castle settled into its nighttime defenses, every man knowing his role should danger appear beyond the walls. yet within the life of the household continued its steady rhythm. The evening meal was smaller than the midday feast, but still hearty, with warm bread, pottage, and ale, enough to satisfy hungry bellies. The hall filled once again with voices and laughter, though quieter now, mellowed by the weariness of the day. Afterward, stories were told by the fire tales of saints, heroes, and ancestors, while the younger children drowsed against their mothers' sides. As darkness claimed the land, the household slowly dispersed. The lord and lady withdrew to their chambers, their retainers and servants to humbler rooms or straw pallets in the outbuildings. Guards tightened their cloaks against the night air and took up their posts along the walls. The flicker of torchlight illuminated stone and shadow. The distant call of an owl echoed over the moat, and the steady rhythm of the castle shifted once more, moving from the work of the day into the vigilance of the night. And so, the cycle of the castle's life turned, each day a pattern of duty, prayer, labor, and rest, bound by the stone walls that stood watch over all within. The great hall is now bustling with activity long after the morning meal has ended. The servants, having cleared the long wooden tables, sweep the floors with bundles of reeds tied into rough brooms, scattering fresh rushes mixed with herbs to mask the lingering odors of spilled ale, smoke, and damp wool. The air hums with sound, the clink of tankards being stacked, the chatter of washerwomen carrying away stained linens, the distant hammer of the blacksmith ringing out from the courtyard. At the center of all this movement stands the beating heart of the castle, not just its lord and lady, but the network of labor and service that allows them to live in comfort while stone walls protect all within. In the kitchens, the fires never fully die. The great hearth is restoked, its flames licking upward as cooks prepare for the midday meal, which must be plentiful and varied if guests are present. Pungent smoke fills the air as salted pork and fish are brought down from storerooms, barrels cracked open, their contents soaked in water to soften the preserved flesh. Vegetables, onions, cabbages, leeks, and carrots are chopped on thick wooden blocks, scarred from years of use. Young boys scurry with buckets of water from the well, splashing it into cauldrons. Bread, baked earlier in the ovens, is carried in baskets, loaves, crusty and warm, filling the corridor with their comforting scent. The cook, a stout woman with a stern face, barks orders to her helpers, making sure no mistake delays the preparation. For mealtime in the hall is as much a display of wealth and order as it is about feeding hungry mouths. Elsewhere in the castle, the lady presides over her own duties. In a chamber near the solar, she oversees the spinning and weaving, her maidens gathered around with distaffs and spindles. The room hums with quiet conversation and the soft whir of wool being twisted into thread. A tapestry, half finished, hangs from a wooden frame, its images of hunting scenes and heraldic beasts slowly emerging in colored threads. The lady pauses to correct a servant's hand, guiding her fingers to weave more tightly, her authority gentle but firm. Her presence here is not idle pastime, but essential management. These fabrics clothe the household, dress the retainers, and sometimes serve as gifts of honor. Meanwhile, the lord of the castle walks the bailey with his steward, inspecting the stores. They move through the granary, where sacks of grain are stacked carefully, guarded against both vermin and damp. In the armory, racks of spears and crossbows stand ready, their edges gleaming where they have been sharpened. The lord runs a hand across a shield painted with his coat of arms, nodding at the smith, who tends to repairs. The steward reads from a wax tablet, reciting the tally of supplies, the number of horses in the stable, the coin collected from tenants. Each detail matters, for a castle cannot survive on pride alone. Its strength lies in preparation. As the sun rises higher, children play in the outer ward. The lord's sons chase each other with wooden swords, their laughter ringing against the stone walls, while a tutor calls them back to lessons in Latin and Scripture. Daughters sit under the watch of a governess, learning to embroider letters or recite prayers. For them, every skill, from reading psalms to managing servants, is training for futures that might place them in other noble households. The younger children of servants dart between chores, fetching straw for the animals, their games woven into their work, growing up within walls that never know silence. At midday, the bell rings, and the castle gathers again for food. This meal is less grand than the evening feast, but still marked by ceremony. Trencher bread is set before each person, a thick slab to hold meat and sauce, later discarded to the poor or the dogs. Bowls of pottage, a thick stew of grains and vegetables, are passed down the table. Those of higher rank receive portions of fish or fowl, perhaps a pigeon pie or roasted rabbit, while retainers and soldiers eat the simpler fare. Ale is poured freely, the yeasty brew safer than water, quenching thirst as laughter and conversation swell. A minstrel plucks at a lute, singing of knights and distant lands, his voice rising above the clamor. When the meal is done, business resumes. Petitioners from the nearby village have been waiting for the Lord's attention, and they are called into the hall. A farmer bows low, his hat in hand, complaining of a neighbor's cow that trampled his crops. The Lord listens, his steward taking note, and a judgment is made, perhaps a fine, perhaps restitution in grain. Another villager pleads for timber to repair his roof, and the Lord grants him permission to take wood from the forest. Each case, though small, binds the people to their Lord, reinforcing the authority that makes the castle not only a fortress, but the center of law and governance. Beyond the walls, the life of the castle spreads outward. Messengers ride through the gate, carrying letters sealed with wax, bound for other lords, abbots, or distant kin. Travelers approach, seeking shelter, and are questioned by the gate guard before entry is allowed. Peddlers, with carts laden with cloth, spices, and trinkets, find business in the yard, their wares inspected closely. The castle is never entirely closed. It breathes with the life of those who serve, visit, or seek its protection. In the afternoon, training begins in earnest. In the practice yard, squires and men-at-arms gather, weapons in hand. The clang of steel on steel echoes as they spar under the watchful eye of the master-at-arms. Shields splinter, sweat drips, and bruises are earned with each bout. The squires, young noble boys, serving their apprenticeship, learn not only how to fight, but how to endure, how to polish armor, care for a destrier, and conduct themselves with discipline. The Lord's sons join the drills, their laughter replaced by grunts of effort, for their path demands strength as well as privilege. Archers practice with longbows, their arrows thudding into straw targets, while the sound of hooves rings out as knights tilt at the quinton, striking a rotating arm with their lances. The castle's defenses, too, are never forgotten. Guards patrol the walls, checking the crenellations, watching for smoke or movement on the horizon. The moat is inspected, bridges maintained, and the gatehouse repaired where timbers have weathered. Engineers test the mechanisms of the portcullis, ensuring it can drop in an instant should danger approach. For though the day may seem calm, every man within the walls knows that peace in these times is fragile, and a castle must always be ready for siege. As shadows lengthen, the rhythm of the castle slows. In the chapel, the priest rings the bell for vespers, calling the household to prayer. The air fills with the scent of incense as voices rise in hymns, echoing against stone arches. Candles flicker, their light dancing across painted icons, while noble and servant alike kneel in devotion. Faith binds this world together, reminding all of the higher order that governs not only lords and peasants, but kings and popes. After prayer, the evening feast approaches. The hall is lit with torches and candelabra, casting a golden glow on the long tables. Servants carry in dishes steaming with roasted meats, fish glazed with honey, pies stuffed with spiced fruit, and platters of cheese. The nobility sit at the high table, elevated on a dais, while retainers and soldiers fill the benches below. Music swells again, this time joined by jesters who perform tricks and tumblers who leap with acrobatic skill. Conversation flows, cups are raised, and the hall becomes a place of warmth and festivity, even as the wind howls outside the stone walls. The feast stretches late into the night, laughter mingling with song until the candles burn low. At last, the lord and lady retire to their chambers, their attendants carrying torches to light the way. The great hall empties slowly, retainers stumbling to their pallets, servants cleaning the last of the dishes, guards changing shifts upon the battlements. The castle grows quieter, settling into the deep hum of night. Somewhere, a hound bays, answered by another, across the courtyard, their voices carrying into the darkness. And so, another day in the medieval castle begins to draw to its close. Yet even as silence falls within its stone walls, its life never truly stops. Fires must be tended, guards must remain vigilant, and the very walls themselves must hold steady, watching over all who sleep inside. The castle, timeless and unyielding, stands as both refuge and symbol, a world contained within towers and gates, where every hour holds duty, ritual, and the unbroken rhythm of medieval life. As night settles over the castle, the bustle of the day gives way to a quieter rhythm. Torches flare along the walls, casting flickering shadows across the courtyard, while the heavy creak of the drawbridge signals the final closing of the gates. Guards climb to their posts on the battlements, cloaks pulled tight against the cold, eyes scanning the dark countryside where only faint village fires glow in the distance. The castle becomes an island of light, sealed away from the uncertain night beyond. Inside the great hall, the remnants of the feast linger. Platters with bones and crumbs sit on the long tables, the smell of roasted meat and ale heavy in the air. Servants move quickly to clear the mess-feeding scraps to the hounds, wiping tables and sweeping rushes from the floor. The fire in the central hearth burns lower now, glowing red beneath the soot-darkened rafters. The noble family has retired, the lord to his chamber with sword nearby, the lady to her room hung with tapestries, while the children are led yawning to bed under the watchful eye of a nursemaid. In the kitchens, work continues even after the feasting ends. Pots are scoured with sand, knives are sharpened, and bread dough is prepared to rise overnight. The cook, weary but determined, checks every detail before finally letting her helpers rest on straw pallets near the warm ovens. The smell of herbs and smoke clings to the stone walls long after the last candle is extinguished. Down in the servants' quarters, life is more humble. Men and women huddled together on straw beds, wrapped in coarse blankets, whispering of gossip and rumors overheard during the day. Some speak of wars and raids, others of family far away, while children cling to their mothers for warmth. Sleep comes slowly, for the chambers are cold and the air thick with smoke. But the walls of the castle offer them safety that the open countryside cannot. Outside, the night is still, broken only by the bark of dogs or the cry of an owl. The moat ripples faintly under the moonlight, and the timbers of the great hall creak in the cold. A lone guard, carrying a lantern, makes his rounds, his footsteps echoing along the empty corridors, each shadow seeming to shift as the torchlight passes. For him, the night is long and heavy, yet his duty keeps the silence intact. Slowly, the castle surrenders to sleep. The world outside is locked away, and within the stone walls, all classes from lord to servant find their rest. Yet even in slumber, the rhythm of duty never ends. Before dawn, bakers will rise, fires will be lit, and the clamor of daily life will begin anew. The castle, fortress, and home alike breathes with this cycled day, night, and day, again its life, carried forward by the countless hands that labor, guard, and dream within its walls.